Good afternoon to you all. It's lovely to be here for the first time. My topic today deals with the 3D modeling of an outstanding feature of our site of Kammern Grubgraben. Aside from that, I will sneak in a few new results from our currently ongoing fieldwork, so we all just left the field last night. These new results are dealing with former excavations at this site. First of all, a lot of this information is not yet published, so I would ask you to treat it as such. I suppose most of you already know all about this site, but for those who are maybe not as familiar with it, allow me to shortly summarize the main points. The site lies in eastern Austria in the state of Lower Austria, within the cadastral community of Kammern. We're here quite far away from the maximum alpine glaciation during the LGM, but within the line of continuous permafrost. In the surroundings, we have the Danube Valley exiting the narrow valley of the Wachau into the large, wide open Turner bed. The site is located at the southern edge of the Bohemian Massif and at the southern tip of the so-called Mannhardsberg, which is the smaller finger pointing southwards east of the Kammern. As you can see, there's a high density of upper Paleolithic sites in the surroundings. Most of these sites are located on eastward facing slopes with maximum sunshine extension and shelter from westerly winds. Here you see an aerial picture of the Grubgraben, a small valley in which the site was found weathering out of a deeply entrenched holloway. The location is again sheltered from the north, east and west, and only open and inclined to the south. It's a rather remarkable location, as no matter how cold and windy it is elsewhere in there, there's no wind and it feels noticeably warmer, which is, as you can imagine, not totally the most favorable location for summer excavation. Our students did suffer a little bit in recent weeks. The name of the location was originally Im Grub, which means in the down. Most likely Brandner coined the name Grubgraben, the ditch in the down. This ditch is not a holloway, but a tectonic fault at the opposite side of it. The whole delta today is heavily overprinted by modern vineyard cultivation. A succession of terraces has been created, leveling the steep lateral inclines of the dam. Nearly the entire area is densely planted with vines, apparently of rather expensive vintage, and from our latest inquiries, rather delectable in non-fermented state. If the former valley is envisioned, its primary features are two small drainages coming down from the north and converging at the south of the site, forming a kind of a small spur on which we have our occupation. The site has first been found in the second half of the 19th century and been collected intensively ever since. After first excavations in the 1920s, the major excavation campaigns were conducted by Montewide, Brandner and Klima in the 1980s and 90s. They discovered up to 5 successive cultural horizons, including notable finds as a flute, eyed needles, and other remarkable items. In successive excavation campaigns, about 200 square meters have been excavated in 2 by 2 meter squares. Spatial documentation was in its infancy, and the square meter grid has been changed more than once, leading to exceptionally problematic localizations of the prior excavation campaigns. We will get to that in more detail later on. In 2015, re-examination of the site started. At first it was a salvage operation due to the planning of a new farm track for the vineyard, but it has since progressed into a long-term and full-scale annual research excavation. Currently, roughly 90 square meters have been exposed and 3 archaeological horizons encountered, the first 2 of which have been dated to about 22-23 KABP. During and after the occupation, the site was affected by heavy wind erosion, leading to intense weathering of the remains. So, for example, nearly all the charcoal has been blown out. Now, new government excavation rules require a shift from AutoCAD to GIS. To my lasting excitement, I have the immense good fortune to be responsible for this transition and the evaluation of these 10 years worth of highest quality GIS data. The plan on the long haul will be to have all the data available in 3 dimensions, or profiles, or photos, obviously the point clouds of the science, and to be able to correlate this data with the data from the 2 major old excavations. To have a short look at the fine distributions of the recent excavations, here we have the distribution of flint on the left and bone, teeth, ivory and antler on the right. The flint scatter in and of itself is very dense and covers all excavated squares. The areas of lower density here just reflect areas of less intensive excavation, as only very few square meters have been excavated completely so far. The bones follow essentially the same picture, although the teeth seem to be concentrated in the northeast, and ivory and antler are quite rare generally and only found in singular fine spots. Here on the left we have the ornaments, dentalia, shells and fossils used as personal ornaments. On the right we have remains of the different pigments. In both groups we do see quite dense concentrations, which are very different from the massive flint and bone scatters before. So I do think that these might be possible candidates for activity zones. So now more to the topic of this presentation. All of our excavations have been documented with 2D and 3D photogrammetry. Here you can see the distribution of these photo stacks. The 2D photos were simply developed with Lightroom and georeferenced, while the 3D models were composed with Agisoft Metashape and also georeferenced. In addition to the fine scatters I have shown you before, there's a number of evident features. For that, let's move to the trench called Paul, named after Paul Hazard, who originally used this as a stratigraphic test trench. Previous excavations only excavated 1/2 of it, and the southern half was left untouched. In the north, you see 3 remarkable post holes close together, and in the south, a first impression of the fine density of the occupation surface. Before you are surprised, trench Paul was oriented after the excavation grid of Monte White, which does not correlate to the current one, so the square meter is rotated out of axis of the grid line, as you can see here. Aside from the nice post holes, a high density of stone features have been encountered, which we will now deal with in more detail. So let's get to the meat of the matter, literally, and move to the northeast of the site, to trench 1 and the so-called object 8. Now, this will get a bit complicated. First of all, what you can see here is a compilation of the so-called ortho photos exported from the 3D models. They are far superior in accuracy to the standard 2D photogrammetry. This object 8 is essentially a pile of stones in different stages of excavation. Brandner and Monte White had partially excavated this area before. Our team has excavated some more and extended the original trenches from the 80s. Here we naturally have an issue. As Paleolithic archaeologists, we are not very used to documenting stone features. So what are we going to do with this now? Does it work? Yes, wonderful. So first of all, a good idea is this detailed 3D documentation. That allows for much better estimation of the spatiality of the feature and what you can and gives everybody a lovely impression. What you see here are actually 3 different models, all from different excavation years. These little trenches, do we have a laser pointer here? These little trenches are remains from the 80s. We didn't do it. Please don't ask me what they did there. I don't know. So now we can zoom in to the 3D models a little bit more. I think you can still see the seam lines of the different 3D models. Obviously, the greatest challenge is to get them to fit together properly. I must admit, I was really surprised at how good this data actually is. I would like to point your eye to the stones that are present in 2 different models and see how seamlessly they actually fit together. Also take note of the slight patchiness of some of the stones here. These three different 3D models have been taken at different light conditions, so obviously the white balance on the photos is not the same for each model. I will need to correct that in the future, but for the moment this allows us to evaluate the precision of these models. If the same stone has been taken at two different models, we can see how they blend into each other because they're exactly at the same location. So this shows how good this data really is. So here we have only the 9 square meters in the northern corner. The one in the front has been excavated through to Serraless. One fun thing with Agisoft is that you can modify the 3D models. Not comfortably, but it works sufficiently that we can remove the sediments and keep the stones. Basically, we can excavate it backwards or see how it might have looked like when the site was abandoned. The stones are, by the way, from the nearby flanks of the valley and have been manually transported. When you excavate through it, as you can see here, you find a dense layer of large bones. So the combination of permafrost, manually transported stones, and lots of bones suggests an interpretation of this feature as a new cache. The current interpretation is that there's actually more than one, have been made during successive occupations of the site and been reused all the time. The final version is mostly the one after opening, so the stones are quite jumbled together and untidy. Within this part, there have also been 2 hard features, which is another good indication for reuse of the cache. I won't deny that what I showed you so far is no answer to the question of what do we actually do with it. Yes, we have very nice 3D models, about 25 now, and 15 of which are cropped to only show the stones. They surely are great for visual assessment of the feature. They also took tremendous computation time, so there wasn't much time to do very much else with them. What we can definitely easily do is to generate elevation models. Here you see your now familiar view of Object 8. Again, we see the sections of the old excavations in beautiful, vibrant neon greens and blues, but what we also see, or did not see before, is the near circular outline of this feature. Very clearly the border in the north as well as in the south. So that can definitely help us to begin to neutrally define these features and start to understand them better. What we can also do is get cross-sections of them. Here we see one crossing through 2 of the 3D ends, and it shows us a really nice stone pile. We also see a slight plateau in the middle. Monty White removed some stone layers while excavating the first culture layer, so probably they have accidentally removed the top of this feature. This now is the part of the feature that was excavated down to the bottom, and we have multiple successive elevation models of it. This now really offers us a look into the center of the feature, which we would otherwise have no chance to get. We beautifully see the slope this feature was constructed upon, and we can also see the little walls that have been at the bottom of the feature, which might have formed chambers topped by closing slates as this one. So here we really have a chance to assess the feature in ways that are not usually possible without the 3D documentation. So now, as we are already rather short on time, let's switch shortly to the issue of adding the material from the old excavations. This you haven't seen before. This is the brand new autumn mosaic from this year's campaign, combined with some of the older ones to show the entirety of the area that has been opened so far. This is, of course, not yet the final state. The last photo I took yesterday. Now, as we have not yet finished the campaign, next presentation will see it. Anyway, one major goal of this year's campaign was to figure out some of the old open questions regarding the old excavations, mainly locating Sandna's eastern excavation border and also getting an improved picture on Monty White's trench distribution. This is the new, very fresh, last week map of the old excavations. As I said before, the correlations are very difficult due to the fact that both Monte-White and Brandner used a very similar coordinate system with the same letters, but they have probably accidentally shifted it by 1 meter at some point. That results in many wrong plans and confusing excavation borders. During the new excavations, the old excavation borders have been encountered in several places, which you can see here in the red line. These allow us now to tie the separate polygons from the different excavation campaigns into the modern plans. This year, we succeeded in finding a few more of them. This includes a lot of the eastern excavation border of Monte-White. Well, I presume so, as she obviously did not leave a note. And it also includes a small section of Brandner's eastern excavation border. This one. Which we did try to find in order to verify our reconstruction. To my lasting pleasure, we actually found it where we thought it would be, but unfortunately, at least in this small spot, Brandner has completely removed the archaeological layer too. This reconstruction is, of course, an ongoing work in progress and will probably take a few more years to especially figure out the western part of this entire conundrum. But here in the east, I think we're doing actually rather well. Last but not least, just because it is so nice, a few more pictures of the old excavation borders. The former nose profile here was found intact. Even the grid lines in size to draw the profile by Brandner was still visible. Object 8 was covered in an old geotextile, so very easy to find. And an old Afri cola bottle was found in Paul, which dating-wise fits into the excavation year of 1986. The coming campaigns will proceed to uncover the old excavations, and now we will also start correlating the old photos of both Monte-White and Brandner. So, lots left to do. In the meantime, thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Hannah. So we are almost on time. So if there's any question about the 3D modeling and the results from the site, Tristan, Mark. Anybody? So if not, I will ask